Hey everybody, it's Monday, so let's raid my lab. I forgot wire was even in there, so I'll tell you what, I'll make you a deal. If you watch the video, I'll try to make wire interesting. Let's go do it. All right, wire, here we go. I promise you I'm not going to bubble gump and go through every single type of wire, but in fact, we're not even really going to cover DuPont wires in this video at all. I'm going to have a whole separate one on those. So we're going to get those out of the way. But this class of wires I generally consider, they're called hookup wires or things like that, and they're basically maker wires, and you can get them in nearly any gauge and nearly any color, and a lot of times they come in boxes, and you can buy a set of them that are basically all the same size or various sizes, different colors. There's a bunch of different ways you can buy them, but the one kind of consistent thing is that they're expensive. And the other consistent thing you're going to find out in this video is that I'm cheap. And so it's not like I go to yard sales every single day, but when I see this stuff cheap, I buy it. Like at flea markets and stuff like that, I'll get this stuff for 10 cents or a quarter, you know, way under $1 a roll. And so like I have some of these, I mean, these are just antique rolls of this stuff, but the insulation is still good and the wire is still good. And it's just a really good quality wire that I got all this, like a bunch more of this in a box for like way under $5. And so, number one thing is if you see maker wire cheap, grab it, because it is really nice to be able to have red and green and, you know, individual colors for individual projects. So you can get this stuff in stranded, or this is solid. You can get it in, let's see if I can get up here a little closer. Focus. So you can get it in stranded, you can get it in solid. You can get it in tinned copper, you can get it in aluminum, all that kind of stuff. Just some very general rules is that in general solid is cheaper, but it's also more brittle. So in other words, if this were to get bent back and forth enough times, it's relatively easy to break something like this off, where the stranded is going to be a little bit more flexible. And if you guys ever watch the channel Voltlog, that guy has a lot of awesome videos about, you know, he lights the wire on fire to see if it's true copper, if it's just copper coated, all that kind of stuff. He's a big fan of the silicone wire. I don't think I really have, other than meter probes, I don't think I really have much that is silicone coated. But yeah, this stuff is worth having whenever you can get it. Just keep it on hand, and when you're ready to finally like make your projects, this stuff is fantastic. Okay, the next thing I use a lot of is network wire. And so in my office, I ran 1,000 linear feet of Cat 6, mostly Cat 6, or Cat 6E, and I have a 600 square foot office, so I think that's like what, 109 square meters, something like that. But so I ran a lot, 300 plus meters of Cat 6, and you know, in a 100-meter squared space. And so I use this stuff a lot for quick hookups. I use it for just because it's nice to have 8 connectors, and so obviously you can use it for networking and stuff like that. But beyond that, I use it for projects. Now this stuff is solid and it's also thin, which means that if you have it in an environment where it's going to get bent back and forth a lot, you could stand to break some connections. This is Cat 6, and that is generally what people use for gigabit, although you could use it for higher, for you can use Cat 5e for gigabit in some situations, but you can tell that because it has this little plastic divider thing in there that keeps all the signals separated. Beyond that, for maker projects, I usually use either this or this. And this over here is Cat 3, and this over here is Cat 5. And the reason why I use these is because you can buy them all day long, like partially used for a couple of bucks. And so I paid, I think, $1 each for this somewhat water messed up box of Cat 5 and about the same for this really heavy duty spool of Cat 3. These are generally used for communication, but they're great if you need 8 wires with color coding and all that kind of stuff. It is really good for hooking up, especially in projects that aren't going to move. The next thing I want to tell you about when it comes to wire is don't be afraid to use existing cables with existing connectors and things like that. So this is an XLR connector, and it's primarily used in the sound industry. It gets used in some lighting applications and things like that. I have a little tester here for it, and when it's right, these 3 lights will be lit up, and then these 3 will be lit up at an angle. And so, you can get a good idea that this cable is good. But this cable has been all over the place, and it is basically a sound cable. But if you think about it, nothing really needs to be much more well built than analog sound, because you're going to hear every single little mistake. And so these things are, for one thing, they're not expensive. The second thing is it's really easy to get the connectors. And the third thing is these things are used to getting stepped on all the time. So if you need to make 3 connections and you want to be able to replace the cable, then like an XLR cable or something like that, it's an outside the box choice, but it's a really good choice for your maker projects. And just to take a look at a couple of other things like that, this is an old school AB switch from Belkin. This is probably one of the earlier things they made, but basically what it's made to do is you plug one in here and then you can switch between your A and your B. And so you have these 25 pin cables. And just to let you guys know, like when I was growing up and getting into this stuff, this is what we had to do. You guys all have plug and play, and we had plug and pray, and you just kind of hoped it worked. But like, let's say you have 2 major things that you need to hook up and you want to be able to switch between them. Well, this thing can switch all 25 wires at once, A to B, and this is 50 cents. This still had the sticker on it, 50 cents at the thrift store. And so, I mean, $1 and you have a pretty sweet setup. Same thing with these 1/4 inch cables. They make these in mono and stereo if you need 2 wires or 3 wires. This I got for free. This is a 25 foot, I think it has 9 wires in there, all flexible wires, with connectors in the end. I need to replace the connectors, but I mean, there has to be 150 feet of flexible cables with connectors on them and stuff like that. And along those same lines, like a lot of times for the games I build, this is the control box for, I think, a game show buzzer. And so what I do is I put I lost my Ethernet cable. I put an Ethernet jack on the side, and then if a kid steps on it and breaks the cable or whatever, you'd throw another Ethernet cable in there. But I could have just connected this straight to the control board on the inside, but instead put a little connector. You have Ethernet. Now you have a standard jack and a standard way to replace the cable if it ever goes bad. Another thing I seem to find all the time is speaker cable. I paid $1 each for these 100-foot rolls of Gear-It speaker cable. This is 14 gauge. I think I spent 50 cents on this broken spool of speaker wire. But one of the great things about speaker wire in maker applications, now don't ever use it to hook up to mains voltage, but in maker applications, low voltage applications, there are a lot of strands and it's extremely flexible. And we haven't spent a lot of time talking, or any time talking about gauge, but when you see that this is 14 gauge and this is 16 gauge, the higher the gauge, the smaller the wire. And then there are some other stats like how many strands are in 14 gauge and all that kind of stuff. But for the most part, like in speaker wire, you're not really concerned. But one of the things about this, like this is the wire that I use on my automatic door, because I know this thing can get bent over and over and over again, and even if a strand were to break, it would not break the whole wire. And the fact that it's low voltage means that there's basically no risk to it. So speaker wires are super cheap, easy to come by. Another thing I do is I save all my offcuts and things that come with kits and stuff like that. So I mean, I've got anything from that looks like 8 gauge, 6 gauge, to this pre-twisted wire, to just little bits of wire. Now this is about as much of this stuff as I save. Once this box gets filled up, I don't usually save more of this kind of wire unless it's unique. And so all this stuff is just stuff that I either picked up really cheap, or I took it off another project, or it was the end cut of something else, and it saves me from having to go to a new roll and getting new stuff. So the last couple we're going to take a look at are all either dollar or free finds that I had. This wire here is shielded, and it has your shield over here, and it has 2, 4, 6 stranded wires inside of it. Just kind of a nice nice flexible package. I've got bunches of chunks like this that were getting thrown out that I use this for most of my escape room games, have something like that attached to them. Or similarly, this is some big 18 gauge flexible wire was getting thrown out. Then these three were all $1 each. I've got this spool of 6 conductor solid wire. This is 3 conductor solid wire. This was made in 1993, but I mean the insulation on it is perfect, and it's solid wire. And here's a an 18-2 with a ground. And what is this? I mean, it's got to be 1,000 feet. It's a 1,000-foot spool, a 305-meter spool of this wire that I got for $1 because somebody couldn't think of what they'd want to do with 18-2. I think it's 18-2. But you know, for me, like 18-2 is perfect for 12 volts. And so I use this stuff all the time. And yeah, so I mean, there's not going to be any affiliate links or anything like that at the end of this video. The thing I want you to know is just to go out there and look and see what comes up and see what kinds of free things you can get and recycle. I mean, most of this stuff would have wound up in the trash. And now I can't store everything and I can't pick up everything I find, but you know, I have a tub of wire and that saves me from having to go out there and buy more. So thanks for watching.